of these days we're going to figure that out. Hey everybody, my name is DJ Eshelman. Welcome back to another THRIVEcast. And today, hey, don't want to hit that button. I'll hit that button. There we go. I am a technologist, I swear. We're gonna have a fun time today, but before we do, I just wanted to reintroduce you to our affiliate partner, Crisp. They remove background noise from your microphone, given any situation that you have on your computer, be it recording, doing a live broadcast like we are, or doing those dreaded calls with your team that we're going to be talking about a lot today. So Crisp automatically removes background noise by AI technology that learned what voices actually sound like and removing everything else automatically. It's pretty cool. You can try it for free. And if you do decide to buy, which you totally should, we get a little kickback, which is a lot of fun for us because it helps us do more with this channel. So go to thrive-it.com/KRISP for Crisp and have some fun with that. So with that, let me bring on our co-host Jeff Pitch in 3, 2, 1, and go.
Oh, look at that. First time. I like it. Good
Yeah.
job. Yeah. How many technologists does it take to change the light bulb?
Well, I do have a little bit of a cheat thing there too.
I know, but it's still funny that no matter how far down this technology rabbit hole we go, the simple things still throw us for a curve.
It's true. It's true. And as always, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to put them in the chat, even though I think at the moment, I don't think anybody's actually live with us, but we'll just keep talking as if they are because it makes for a cool.
Yes. I've had to do that before. I had to, back in the day, I was doing a webinar. Well, not webinar. Kind of a public demo. We would do these monthly at Unidesk, and we would get a decent amount, and then there was one time where I had one person, and I still have to, you still have to treat it as if there's multiple people on there and things like that. It was quite interesting from a mentality standpoint, knowing you're only talking to one person, but
Yeah.
having to treat it as an audience of many. So
Yeah. And it's weird. Actually, I think this might lead into our topic pretty well today, but I think another part about it live is that even if you're on a consistent schedule and things like that, people still have things that come up and meetings and things like that. So it's just as easy to get, I don't want to say distracted, but called away and things like
yeah,
that too. So we certainly understand. That's why we make these recordings available for you and why actually, I mean, if you're listening to this after the fact, you already know, but um, recordings, podcast, all that kind of stuff is all possible. So that's the beauty of this. But it is fun to interact with you live. So we always do encourage you to join us whenever you can live. You can actually go to Thrive YT, my goodness, thrive-it.com/YT at any point to have a shortcut to our channel, and you can hit that subscribe button, and the little bell icon is what actually gives you notifications within your email and within YouTube itself. So if you have a YouTube account, you can actually get those notifications by subscribing. We definitely encourage you to do that, and it makes it easy to share with a friend. So share it with a friend today.
it's the gift that keeps on giving.
Yes, it is. Cool. Well, we're pinch hitting on a topic today, so this is going to be a lot of fun. Jeff and I didn't do a lot of prep for this, but there is an article, and I'm going to put the reference in the chat as well, but I think it was in the description. Hopefully, it's showing up for people there, but we will put this on the screen. Nice big long article. Probably should figure out some way to shorten that at some point, but
Whenever you put the title of the article in the URL, it's going to be long, like they do. And
yeah, and then there's reasons back and forth to do that. I personally like, you know, tweetable.
you just made up a new word, man. I like it.
I am now Twitterable.
Boom.
That's terrible, Twitterable.
Oh, I, I can't compete with that. Where's Guy Leach when you need him? so
Indeed.
so basically, if you have not read the article, Microsoft essentially commissioned a study um, to find out how workers are doing with work from home, um, which is not in and of itself a bad idea. I mean, at some
Right.
point, you have to figure out where people are at, how are they doing, what does productivity look like, the whole nine yards. Um, Now, as you can see in the title, one consequence was brutal. Okay, well, one clickbait in it, and it got me because I had to see what this was. Um, the problem is, well, I think there's two issues coming up here. One is, when the pandemic started, people got moved from the office to work from home. We heard a lot of what I will call rainbows, unicorns, rosy glasses. It was beautiful. People were happy. People were productive. But now we're starting to see that pendulum swing to the other side because you can't you can't be over here the entire time because that is completely unrealistic. I mean, obviously, the middle is where you want people to be, but in the end, it's going to swing it's going to swing to the bad. And my concern with this, and especially since this article is based on a Microsoft study, not necessarily done by Microsoft,
Mhm.
but in conjunction with Microsoft employees, that people are going to use these studies or what findings, whatever that are coming out and start to push back on getting everybody back into the office. So it's interesting that this is coming out now, and I guess from my perspective, it's not completely unexpected. I'm just surprised it was one done, or really that it was done by Microsoft at this point in time.
Yeah, and I guess I will raise a counterpoint with that too, of that, you know, it's probably good to have these discussions now, not 5 months from now. You know, when it comes to that, it's one of those where, um, well, yeah, it's better to make tactical adjustments.
There, yeah, and
It's
I don't disagree with that, but I think the way that this study is being framed is very inaccurate.
mm,
So my biggest problem with the article, with the study and its conclusions, is that this has not been a normal, hey, do you want to move from the office to work from home full time? All right. This was a crash course in, oh my God, you got to get out of the office and you got to figure out a way to work from home.
yeah,
So we're talking about a huge amount of people that were not prepared
yep,
in their homes to work from home. I mean, how many times have we seen people, yeah, God, I'm working from my dining room, I'm working from, my sofa and coffee table because I don't have an office. I didn't have a place set aside for this type of thing. Um, and as we had discussed actually with Melissa Case earlier in our episode count, it takes time, even for those of us that are prepared to work from home. We have everything set up. There's still a big adjustment time, and the adjustment time is not a couple of months, 3 months, 4 months. It could take up to 8 months, could take a year to really find that balance.
yeah.
So that's kind of, one. I don't think it's a fair comparison at this point, and I don't think it describes the situation, and it just doesn't frame the context correctly with the study.
Okay. Well, as a counterpoint, though, I mean, I understand that this could be fodder to getting people back into the office or whatever. Um, I I don't know if I read it that way, but what I do see is that um, there are, and this is actually I've seen some produced videos on LinkedIn and whatnot. Yeah, I'm trying to make people aware of this, especially managers. That here's the thing we have to remember that, and I'm actually reading a book right now by one of my mentors, Michael Hyatt, called The Vision Driven Leader. And one of the distinctions that he makes, and I appreciate, is that um, managers are not leaders. Managers don't set vision. Managers take resources and try to get the most out of them. That's what managers do. And the thing about this study, what it's saying here is that um, it said that the majority of increases of instant messengers had gone up by 52% during the hours of 6 p.m. and midnight. And that's a pretty big concern. That's encroaching on traditional time with family. And I've been feeling that myself. I've noticed that there's been an increase in the amount of chat messages that I'm getting that are work related at later hours, and so I'm actually concerned about this as well. I mean, there was a Friday a couple of weeks ago where the team I'm working with, there was no reason, they didn't have a deadline that they were up against necessarily or anything like that. They were just working and working and working, and it was a Friday afternoon. I mean, I was already happy houred into it. You know what I'm saying? was it was not in a place to respond really. I was mentally or physically even really. Um, and I'm getting questions, and I'm like, guys, it's Friday. Go be Friday. I think it's not just a managerial problem. I think it's a boundaries problem with people that are working in these situations, and I I I think the part about this that I'm hoping people will wake up to, and I don't see this. In fact, I'm with you. This article is very passive aggressive. It's not taking a stand on anything. It's just saying, "Oh, poor people things," and yeah, boo, boo, boo. Is what it feels like to me anyway.
Well,
Um,
and I think
but
the other thing is, like, I haven't had time to dive into their methodology, right? Because I mean, the
right,
big thing that comes out of it is that they do say that people are working 4 more hours a week than they did when they were in the office.
right, which that I knew, and we talked about that early on in the process. We talked about that um, we got a couple times we talked about that actually,
But
is
the
that the
interesting
productivity
thing,
does go up. But here's my problem with it, what you just said, is it's for more hours. It's not more productivity, it's more hours.
well, and that's the key, right? Is one, what is their methodology for determining what is work time versus personal time,
Yeah,
right? Because I mean, obviously, you have much more flexibility when you work from home, typically, right? You got a doctor's appointment. You don't have to worry about, hey, I'm leaving the office to go somewhere, or something comes up quick. If there's no
yeah.
scheduled meetings, you can quickly head out, go do your thing, come back.
Yeah, that's a great
I mean,
point. So it's not just the fact that we're working from home. It's that there's other circumstances that have been involved with this too. That those factors I don't really see in here. That this
yeah,
is an
and so that's
unprecedented thing we weren't prepared for.
yeah, and there is the case of that. I mean, as you said, is there more hours worked at home? I mean, personally, I don't know how to come up with that number. So, like I said, I'd love to see the methodology they used to do that, because while I'm sure there are times I work a lot more when I'm at home than if I would have been in the office,
Yeah,
that doesn't necessarily mean I would not be putting in those extra hours if I was still in the office. Because I mean, typically we're talking deadlines, things like that are coming up
Yeah.
that you need to get things done before before something hits. Um,
It, yeah. And I think
so
that they're counting this as, being on. It's somewhere in the article they use that air fingers quote on kind of thing. Um, and the premise is actually the one thing I do like about this article a lot is the he says, please let me pose the question. Do you prefer to be work you for 4 more hours per week, or do you prefer to be the fun loving, family adoring, beer sipping, ballet practicing you who is a little different from work you? And I think that is a big part of this too, like is that identity thing. But as far as like that goes, I think I've noticed and I'm starting to catalog how many hours I'm on camera like this. This is
mhm.
good, this is healthy, that sort of thing. But at the same time, um, there was a point, actually, you and I were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, where I just had like a breakdown in the middle of a Zoom happy hour. I'm like, I need to not be on camera anymore. I'm done.
Yep.
I'm done at people looking at me. And the
Yeah,
thing
and
about
and
it,
there is because
yeah,
even an EUC happy hour,
mhm,
it's EUC. That's our job. I mean, that's what we do. That's so
yeah,
you're even though it's a happy hour, you still feel like you're on. And I
yeah.
completely get that.
Yeah, and especially and it's a lot for me of embracing a a new identity that I've been working on for some time. And so for me to jump in, both barrels blazing, that's not unexpected. I was actually planning on that anyway. This was all for me. A lot of what I'm doing is this is all part of a bigger plan, a bigger vision that I've had for the last 2 years. I mean, I had there was I was just, it's funny, I was just looking at this the other day, is I had written some notes in October of 2018 that laid out a vision. I called it Vision 2020. And the idea was that by November 2020, I wouldn't be doing any more consulting work, that the technical consulting work, that I wouldn't be the only person doing what I'm doing. I wanted to bring people like you on and all the other things
Mhm.
we're doing. So it's not just me. I wanted to get out of that solo idea and make it so that if this, if God forbid something happened to me, at least there would be something that could, in fact, survive. That sort of thing. And so I actually got a little morbid about it and said, well, okay, let's treat this like November 2020, I'm dead. Okay, what does that look like? Kind of thing. So when it comes to that, this is all part of big vision for me. But um, I think part of it, like you're saying, is that there was no vision for this as far as
Right.
working from home. There was no vision for that, and so people got thrust into this horrible situation. And granted, I don't want to be overly dramatic here, probably because honestly, let's be honest. We kept working. Our workforce kept going. Our technology saved us as far as that goes. In that regards, a lot of us in end user computing were ready for this. That's something that should be praiseworthy. But at the same time, from a cultural standpoint, we weren't prepared for this.
Well,
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
we were prepared.
Oh,
EUC
collectively, I mean, yeah,
technology. Yeah,
yeah.
but the frontline workers, and I don't like to put it that way, but I mean, really, the users that we support,
Hmm.
we're definitely not ready for this.
Yeah. So one thought that comes to my mind about this, and the caveat here that I've got a degree in psychology, so my mind has been kind of it processes things that way. It just can't help it sometimes. But I have to wonder if some of this is well, you mentioned before, like the fact that people's workspaces weren't really prepared for this. Like they had to bring work into their homes. And I don't, I don't know if it's fair to expect this, but the average manager does not understand the psychology of that. That that they
Yeah.
had a separation between work and life. There's a balance there. Well, that's been completely obliterated as far as that's concerned. And if managers don't learn to respect those boundaries, then they're just thinking of them as on all the time. And so if people aren't, I hate to say this, but if they can't set those boundaries psychologically, there's a problem here because work becomes an invasion at that point.
Well, but again, going back to Melissa, what we talked about before, it takes time, even for those of us that are prepared to find that balance, to be able to say, you know what, it's 5 o'clock. I gotta go. I can't be here. I've got family stuff to do, personal stuff, whatever the case may be. It doesn't even matter. But on the same token, most people, a lot of people, I don't know about most, let's say a lot of people kind of stop working the 9 to 5,
Yeah.
right? Because as long it has always been ingrained in me, and my philosophy has been, if you're getting your work done, I don't necessarily care that you're getting it done at 10 a.m. I don't care if you're getting it done at 2 a.m. Just as long as it's getting done, be there for the things that you absolutely, that you need to be there for. But working 9 to 5 can also be extraordinarily restrictive,
Yeah.
from that standpoint as well. In
Especially
that,
when you talk about
like you
different
said,
time
when
zones.
I go home, that's a separation. I don't want to bring my work home with me.
Right.
But what if you get inspiration at 9 p.m.
Hmm.
and you don't have your connection into the office to be able to work on stuff? So I
Yeah.
mean, it's
There's that. Yeah.
it's in so obviously, to me, I'm a big proponent. I also do understand that there are situations that just don't make sense for work from home, and you cannot eliminate the human interaction. I mean, that's still an important piece of the puzzle, being face to face, getting in front of people. From a sales
Yeah.
perspective, I still believe that's a huge piece in people's favor, is when you can go out to a client site, a prospect, whatever, meet with them, shake hands, bump elbows, whatever the case may be now. So that stuff is all important, and still very much will be. It's great that we can have VMworld virtual and make it cheaper for people, but on the same token, it's the networking. When you go to a VMworld, a Synergy, a Microsoft Inspire, meeting your peers, meeting new people, that's the draw of those shows. Not necessarily, I mean, at least for me, not necessarily the sessions, if that makes sense.
Yep. No, it does totally. And there's something about true conversation that is really difficult to emulate virtually. And
Mhm.
especially with technologies like Zoom, it's great to see everybody's faces all at once and all that kind of stuff. But Zoom doesn't know how to balance out who should be talking and who's not. So, the thing about us as people in end user computing, especially, I've noticed this, is that we tend to be more gregarious. We will talk over each other without hesitation. A lot of IT technologies, not so much, but in end user computing, I've noticed that we we're a lot more social than a lot of other kind of branches of IT, if you will, or other technology focuses. And so, you don't get a bunch of developers in a room and get the same kind of responses as you do when you get a bunch of like Citrix, you know, folks in a room, for example. You get different responses. It's just the way it is. But
No,
I think there's a part of that too, culturally. We have to recognize that. um yeah. And this article talks about some things that I think might be healthy, but I was talking to my wife about this, and there was a race to embrace a new normal. And this kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about the fact that this study is almost too soon. And I will agree with this, that there's been a race to embrace the new normal. And the reason I think that's bad is because we haven't solidified yet. We don't have a new normal yet. If we try and make something a new normal, and we've got to understand the psychology behind this, right? We've kind of talked about this a little bit previously. That this is something where you need to embrace that there is a need for stability within all of us. We all have that. You know,
Mhm.
we want to we naturally go towards the comfortable, not the discomfortable. You know, this is something that is in us. So if we race to a new normal, that is trying to force normalcy on a not normal situation. And the problem with that I see, and I think this is part of the article that's bothering me, is the thought of like virtual pajama Fridays or things like that becoming a new normal. I personally I don't see that as healthy.
No.
It's one of those things where it's very forced and very awkward, and it actually will end up probably excluding more people than including, which I
Yeah.
mean is fine for little things here and there, but when you race to make things like that the new normal, well then it becomes a new normal. It becomes like a meeting. It becomes like a requirement kind of a thing.
Yep.
So I'm not saying that those things are bad in and of themselves, but we have to be very cautious about what we're making a new kind of normal,
Yep.
because
Yeah,
honestly,
absolutely.
yeah, I think
And
yeah,
sorry.
going back to what we're talking about with Melissa, that this does need to be what we're doing, but we need to do it right. She was absolutely right about that. We need to do this the right way and not just race to a conclusion and think that's the way it's going to be from now on.
Yeah, and when I see what has it been like Twitter, Facebook, and a few big, essentially SaaS companies, software companies, saying, "Hey, forevermore, we will be work from home."
Yeah.
Okay. That's the other extreme, and I don't agree with that either. Yeah, I mean,
No.
while I do love my work from home, I've been doing it for over a decade. It doesn't, for right now with the situation you're in. I think you nailed it right on the head, which is one, we don't know what this normal will turn out to be,
Mhm.
and jumping to a conclusion, Office Space reference, will
I'm on my
will
jump to
get.
conclusion mat right now.
Yeah, there you go. See, yeah, so we don't know. We and we haven't. I'm sorry, but March, April, May, June, July, 4 or 5 months that it's been. You're telling me companies have retooled their processes, their how they do things. They've learned how to do all of it remotely now. No,
Yeah.
it's this is stuff. These are things that take time, and like you said, you can't force that to happen. You don't want to take a process that was working and break it just to get it to fit in, square peg round hole thing
Yeah.
all over again. So I don't think anybody should be coming to a conclusion right now whether you're going to do full work from home, full office, a hybrid approach. I don't think you can do that right. I don't think anybody can do that right now because there's not enough time has passed to have learned the ins and outs, allowing the employees to learn their ins and outs, their boundaries, get set up properly. It's exactly those things. So it while don't I don't disagree that these studies do need to be done. Excuse me. I do believe that the conclusions as drawn and highlighted are very bad at this point.
Mm.
I mean, we all need to recognize that that most companies are still in the infancy of their work from home, for their people. And a year from now, we will have a much better idea. And that's, I think when we can, companies need to really start looking at, is this working? Is it not working? What do we need to do to make it work? What do we need to do to pull people back? Whatever the case may be. But 4 or 5 months in to people working from home that were not prepared to work from home, companies were not prepared with their processes.
Yeah.
You know, you, I'm afraid that people are going to look at these studies, especially with the name Microsoft behind it. I mean, Microsoft, WVD, Windows. I mean, it's to me, I just smell a recipe for disaster, or at least
Yeah.
fodder for, anti work from home. And not that they are completely wrong, and like I said, we are not completely right that, when people say work from home is for everybody, no, that's as wrong as no work from home,
Yeah.
but we need to take the time and make the effort to find out what does work, what does not work, and how can we make it all work,
Yeah. Yeah. And honestly, I think sometimes we need to recognize that if you let the company dictate that, you have this danger of, well, it's almost like a guilty feeling. Like, well, okay, the article talks about recharge Fridays, which I know a lot of companies are doing. But the time to institute that wasn't now. The time to do that was 5 years ago. It needs
Yeah.
to be part of the culture, not something that's driven as an initiative by the company, because then it becomes something to manage.
Yep.
And if your vision isn't for people that are balanced to be working with you, if you don't have a leader that's doing that, then like what we're talking about with Twitter and things like that, with 100% work from home, that culture goes right out the window. Your culture needs to be embracing remote work and not like making it so that it's just a add-on or whatever. It needs to be fully embraced. And if we don't do that now, if we don't make those kind of adjustments and kind of go through the pain and the discomfort of, hey, we're just trying some things and seeing what's going to work, and we want to be okay with that. We don't want to pretend we have all the answers because we studied and found out 52% of people are doing, more instant messaging or whatever. That's not a that's fine as a metric or whatever, but it's not fine as a culture. Your
Right.
culture needs to be defined by your leadership, and that's where I do take a little bit of umbrage to some of this stuff where it's just like, if your leaders are just allowing the management to just, hyper manage resources and hours and things like that, then we're not going to benefit from this long term. But if you do adjust to the culture now and make it something where it's not just expected to work from home, and at the same token, it's not like um, expected to come into the office, where it becomes a balance point and that becomes part of the culture, then that becomes much more healthy in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And, this, uh, I've got an 18-year-old graduated this year. Well,
Mhm.
if you can call it graduation. But, he and I were talking about, because he's seems to have it in his head that, because we've been talking about him, you need to get a full-time job now. You're 18, you're out of school, you need to be doing something. There's the part of his head that is thinking that I need to find a job that will be training me for a career. Whether I end up in, could be an electrician, could be anything, he doesn't want to go to school. He knows that, so he's
Yeah.
he's he's not a college kid, and that's great. I mean, if he became an electrician, gee, man, who's gonna you're not going to replace electricians with automation. But what it comes down to is that I think he has it in his head that he's got to find a job that will start to further where he might want to go. And I keep, I'm trying to explain to him that you don't have to take a year, just work factory job or something. I mean, when I was first out of high school, that's all I did. I went to a
Yeah.
temp agency, signed up, and was doing factory work for, a year or so or whatever it was. Um, get your head on straight, and then, at any point in time, you can make that decision. You know what? I want to see what it's like to be an electrician, a plumber, whatever the case may be. And you're not stuck. Basically, in a very roundabout way, what I'm trying to say is, I think for a lot of companies, I'm not sure you're going to agree or disagree with this, DJ, but this is sort of the time now that you're kind of in a forced position. Throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I
Yeah,
mean,
that's
this
what I'm
is the
saying.
time to do it. you
That's
know, where you
exactly.
have that flexibility. You may come up with something, or somebody may come up with something that others hadn't thought of, and suddenly it's like, oh my god,
Yeah,
that works.
I love that.
That
Yeah,
that
it's
sounds
this
really good.
is the time
Yeah,
to innovate.
this is the test. Yeah, time to
Yeah,
test, innovate. So take those opportunities, because once we're 2021 comes around, it's going to be a lot harder to start, to try to start then, to make whatever changes, you might need. So definitely the time needs to be taken. This is the perfect opportunity just to, even if it's small, just figure things out, see what works, what doesn't work, and take those lessons learned. And that's the important thing here, is that you need to learn from those mistakes and the stuff that works. And as we get closer to, okay, now we need to start making some real decisions,
yeah,
you'll have a better picture of what your workforce can and cannot do, and what works for them and does not.
yeah, yeah. And it's funny. There's at the very end of the article, they're talking about these recharge Fridays, and it's not an all-day drinking session, at least as far as I'm aware. Instead, it's a day free of meetings, and I think that's admirable, but problematic. Um, to say this, like, from the psychology standpoint, there is a shock factor when you're used to having meetings all day long, and that is something that I actually have heard a lot of, is that the amount of meetings that people are attending has skyrocketed. It is way worse than it ever was, because you know what? It's easier to do now. You don't have to go find a conference room. You don't have to go, find everybody's schedule and everything like that. You just make it happen, and pretty much nobody has an excuse at this point. It's like, you're stuck at home, that sort of thing. So meetings have become just a real problem. And so if you have an entire week where you have meetings all day, that might be a bit of a shock to the system, to just have a single day where it's no meetings. I don't know if you're necessarily going to get more productivity about that. I almost want to say that, well, and this is something I was going to suggest for people anyway, is that I think two things should happen. This is just my opinion, just based on observing, companies for the last 5 years and the way things have gone. I think two things should happen. One, managers should set up distinctive hours of the day where it is a meeting free time frame every single day. I've seen companies do this before, and it was extremely successful, because what it meant is that there were no meetings allowed during those days. Now, this is something where work from home, this is actually more compatible with. The reason I saw companies stop doing that is because the argument that they had unutilized conference rooms during those times, which, utterly and completely ridiculous. But that, I mean, what I said to that literally was, and this was a project manager that was saying this to me, and I said, if you have more meetings than you have space, your problem isn't the space. The problem is you have too many meetings. And they were taken so aback by that. And that's just because they're managers. That's what they do. They manage resources, and they just rinse and repeat. They don't have that vision necessarily unless you give it to them. So that's the first thing. So I think personally that should be a kind of corporate standard with a lot of these places, is to have at least 2 hours of every day that is no meeting zone. You cannot have meetings scheduled during that day. You know, that should be a thing. The other thing is, employees need to get more aggressive about scheduling time for themselves on their work calendar.
Yep.
We forget sometimes that people are looking at your calendar to determine your availability. And the reason you get scheduled for things that you just, oh, why did somebody schedule it during this time? I can't say no because I don't have anything else going on. That happens all the time. So you need to work with your management to say, hey, look, I'm going to be putting some stuff on the calendar that's just boundary time, like literally just for that, just to catch up and do things that are outside of meetings. Get that negotiated with your with your management. And honestly, that kind of goes into the whole, we a lot of people that were working at an office had a commute. Well, that commute now is being used for work. And I think that's a mistake. I think people should be taking that same time that they had for commutes and making that personal development time and blocking it off in their calendar. The same they would do it previously when they had a commute. A lot of people that I know were actually putting their commute time on their calendar as a recurring appointment, saying, don't schedule me for a meeting. I'm on a train, that sort of thing. And it's really kind of one of those things that we kind of lost.
That's actually a good point. Back to the methodology of that study.
Mhm.
Did it take into effect commute time as work time?
Mhm.
Because I mean, if you're living in California, I mean, in you're like San Francisco, LA, you could be driving 5 miles, takes 2.5 hours.
Yep.
Is that work time, or is that your technically personal time because you're not in the office? So that would be interesting to find out if, like I said, the methodology, the comparisons,
Yeah.
where were the lines drawn? Now I do see, I've heard differently about meetings. I've heard they've actually gone down because people have had a harder time. They've they used to, because everybody would be in office. It was easier to gather everybody because they were right there to pull them into a meeting. Whereas now, and I kind of I was relating this to the rise in text messages, IMs, whatever,
Yeah.
in that, yeah, maybe I don't need to have a meeting for this, but I still need to talk to so and so. So I'll
Yeah.
text them or IM
Right.
them, whatever the case may be.
Yep.
Um, so actually, now I'm curious on where that actually falls. Is it higher or lower? The same?
Yeah. We need
But
people to
either way, whatever
focus.
way it comes out, whatever
Yeah.
way it comes out, you're right. There still needs to be that balance. Now, to me, implementing a what they call it, the Friday thing, re-energize,
Fresh Fridays. Yeah.
yeah. Um, this may sound bad, but work from home, I don't think necessarily needs that, because you know what? If I don't have anything scheduled, and I don't have anything that I need to be doing at from 10 to 12 on Wednesday,
Mhm.
I'm gonna go do something 10 to 12 on Wednesday. And you know, so
Yeah. Yeah. That's a
it's
bit of
I think
personal
it's easier
responsibility.
to
Yeah.
recharge the batteries when you do work from home than
Yeah.
when you're in the office 9 to 5.
Yeah.
But above and beyond that, I do agree with that blackout time for meetings, making sure that people could stay productive, or, they don't have to worry about if they make a doctor's appointment that somebody's going to try to schedule over it, those types of things. So I do believe that is a great thing to have. But you were talking about the personal time, scheduling your own personal time. That was a hard lesson I learned.
Mhm.
As an SC. So the way it worked at Unidesk is, we weren't just SCs, but in the end, um,
Right.
we were doing SC work, but we weren't tied to any particular salesperson. I hadn't been scheduling any personal time off. I just assumed everybody ate lunch. But when you've got 4 or 5 different salespeople, they're taking lunches at different times. And suddenly I was scheduled literally from 8 o'clock in the morning to 5 o'clock in the evening, 1 hour chunks of doing demos the entire day, not one break. That's an exhausting day. You are absolutely right. From that point on, I took that lesson, and people had been telling me, you're going to want to do this. You're going to want to put in an hour for lunch or whatever. Just block it off. Yeah, I started doing that after that because I don't think I could have done that ever again. That's a
Yeah.
hard thing to do, man. Nine demos straight.
Yeah. And I had similar things when I was in field consulting, that was really important for me to learn as well, is that from the other side of that too, of the need to respect people's calendars. And it was
Yes.
always, again, I'm going to sound like I'm really harping on managers that they're evil people or something like that, and that's not true. But you've got to work to contain your evil. You got to recognize you have a little bit of it, and you need to contain it. If you're a manager, you need to hear that from me right now. Um, what I've seen in the field, and in a similar kind of vein, uh, when I'm doing consulting, it's usually if I'm especially on uh, contracts where I'm there for a week, the expectation is that I'm there for a week. We need to get this done in a week, kind of thing.
Yep.
And I've literally gone to places where this happened to me it was somewhere in Oregon, if I recall. Uh, Landed, got to the hotel, all that kind of stuff, and hadn't heard anything. It was kind of odd. It wasn't getting a response from this person. But I was like, okay, well, let's just go ahead and go in as we're scheduled, and do all the things. And come to find out that the person was on vacation that week, and the manager hadn't told anybody that we were coming or that I was coming. And it was a we. There was I had a junior consultant with me, um, and it's just one of those things where that constant expectation of being on ended up very much a problem in this case, because he couldn't even conceive that his engineer was on vacation. It was just that it was a problem. So be aware of that as first of all, and be aware of people's boundaries is important. But the other aspect of this from a consultant standpoint, what I learned to ask in preparation calls before we even started the whole thing is just to get very clear. And one of the first things I would always ask is, okay, when it comes to scheduling, what hours do you typically work? That's the first question that I ask.
Yeah.
When are you there? When are you working?
Yep.
And that's actually how I know how many people have massive commutes and things like that, just because of the sheer amount of data that I've gotten over the years back from people about, for crying out loud, I can think of places in like New Jersey, or even worse in like Manhattan and places like that, where literally people spent 4 hours of their day commuting to work. And my response to that was always like, wow, I would not even bother working. I'm sure their life is a lot different now. I obviously haven't talked to them, and maybe they'll be watching sometime and make a comment. Oh, my life's so much better with work from home, you know. But at the same time, it could be a lot worse too, because these people were very well read. They would listen to tons and tons of audiobooks and things like that on the train at commuting in. And so they had all this time to develop. And if that was taken away from them, that could be bad. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is that um, as a consultant, I had to learn to be respectful of people's time and schedules and get that in advance. And so I can
Yeah.
know to not try and schedule all day meetings with people if that wasn't going to be an availability thing, and try to
Yep.
work around that. And actually, I talk a little bit about that in the book, not a lot. I probably should have some sort of a follow up to that, to kind of for the consultants out there, and maybe even some of the um, project managers out there, to talk more about boundaries of your people that are working with you, because it's really important. But
Yeah.
if you can get into practice of scheduling that time and being proactive about it, then you're a lot better off. I think that that's what happens a lot. And I hate this. I hate to have to even say this, but a lot of us in technology think that, well, we work in this world of very finite things, yet we think our managers are psychic. We think they just know when we've had too much. We think they just magically know that we need some time and that we're frustrated with all the meetings. We think they magically know that. Spoiler alert, they're not psychic either.
It's kind of like your mom, right? She always knew when you were doing something bad, but trust me, it's not because she was psychic.
No, no, it's that watchful eye for sure. And a
Yeah.
good manager sees that. And I will say that in my time, I have encountered some really high quality managers. In fact, I actually maintain a relationship with a lot of them, because I've saw so much quality in what they're doing. We talked to George a couple weeks ago, same kind of thing, where you see just a mindset difference in people that are really good about, you know, being managers of people, not necessarily managers of resources, that sort of thing. So,
But even, in this, I think you bring up a good point, which is whether it's with your manager or really anything, is you need to be able to self advocate,
yeah.
because even the greatest manager in the world isn't always going to be able to figure out, that you're overworked, overstressed, whatever. You need to be able to advocate for yourself,
Hmm.
for those situations where, maybe something happened overnight that your manager doesn't know about, and you're about to jump off the bridge, figuratively. So it's yeah, so you need to be able to advocate for yourself. Absolutely. One thing I did want to follow up on is you brought up that great point of asking what their schedule is.
Hmm.
The other thing that I've learned kind of as a follow up, at least for the first day, because usually the first day is a Monday, right?
Yeah.
So I've always found that, okay, you get in at 9. How much time do you need to get through your normal
Hmm.
startup routine?
Hmm.
And when do you then want me to come in, or something along those lines? That could be every day. They know they're going to be with you every day, so they need a half an hour to an hour in the morning to get through the stuff that they may have pushed aside or missed the day before.
Yeah.
So just because they start at 9 doesn't necessarily mean you need to be in at 9. They may not want you there until 9:30, 10 o'clock, whatever the case may be. You
It's
got
always.
to give them time, because even though they're spending, because of the fact they're spending all their time with you,
Mhm.
yet they still have a job to do. So, and they
Exactly, and
need to
that's
be able to keep that up.
super important for all the SEs and consultants to hear, because I got this pressure all the time. Uh, well, it's not just when I was working with Citrix. Other places were the same way, where there's the appearances being kept up, like the appearance of, and honestly, I always found it kind of silly. In fact, I would literally say this: it's like, look, you're paying me you're paying more to have me fly in on a Sunday night, get a hotel, just so I could be there first thing Monday morning, because of the appearance of being there.
Yeah.
All you're doing is causing frustration with the people that we're consulting with, because they're not there. What would very often happen is I would be outright asked not to come in till like 10 o'clock in a lot of
Yeah.
these places, sometimes even
Yep.
past noon. And it was always kind of funny to me, actually. Yeah, this keeps happening. Yeah, and it's not. Trust me, it's definitely not just Citrix Consulting or a lot of these
Oh,
places.
no, no,
And
no, no.
this is the problem. We could almost title this episode "Managers Gone Wild," because it is kind of that kind of thing where it's just like the perception of is more important than the fact of in a lot of these cases. So the perception of us being there physically and actually having like clocked in kind of a thing
Yeah.
is more important to these people sometimes than actually being productive and working. And the funny thing to me was always the fact that they're willing to spend more money and frustrate me and everyone else more to get it. And I was
Yeah.
like, working? Probably not. In fact, a lot of and again, to your point, uh, what I usually did was if there was a opportunity for me to participate in some of the earlier calls that I wasn't just being sent ahead of time, I would always just pose the question that they never wanted to ask. It's like, do you need time on Monday morning to? It's a leading question, right? Do you need time on Monday morning to get situated before I come on site?
Yep.
And the answer was always yes. And
Yeah.
I'll confess here, that's psychology at work. You're planting an idea in someone's head in a sense. You're giving them permission to say what they don't feel like they can say.
Yeah.
There's that kind of element of it. And so if you're in front of your management at that point, now all of a sudden they're saying, well, customer said they can't they don't want you on site until this time, so I have to honor that. All of a sudden it's that agreement instead of a expectation, which
Yep.
I'll probably spend the next 10 years, harping on the importance of agreements versus expectations. It's
Yeah, make
very
sure.
important.
Yeah, you and I know you talk about it in your book, and we may have talked about it on here. Is yeah, you got to put things down in writing. Don't leave it to a handshake. I know it's in the because
Yeah.
it is an absolute truth. Scope creep is real, and but it's even worse when you don't have an agreement. Like I think the example that you use in your book, which is the absolute perfect one, is what are the success criteria?
Yeah.
Well,
Exactly.
we agreed with it. Can you show it to me in writing? Because yeah, you're right. If somebody changes a position or they're out sick and whatever, suddenly you got to have these agreements. And again, it's not just a verbal agreement, whether it's an email, whether, recorded, whatever, but you need to have basically the proof
Yeah.
that there was an agreement in there.
Yeah, too. And honestly, it just sets the tone. It sets the tone for the whole
Yep.
thing. So yeah, it's very
Yep.
important. So Jeff, closing thoughts.
Yeah, again, this was more. Like I said, I was going to blog this at first, but I think it just was perfect for the show. It was more of a let's be aware that of what's happening out there. Like I said, it started off all rosy. All you heard were great things, and as always happens, that I love the word pendulum. The pendulum swings from side to side, and until we can get it to the middle, it's going to keep doing that. And so we need to be aware. Whether you're directly in working with EUC, whether you're commenting on work from home, whatever the case may be, there's always good points, bad points, but you need to have those points in context of what's happening. And for me, this particular study does not do a good job of putting all their findings into context. That's all I got today.
True, true, true. So I actually I'm going to say this with a heavy dose of kind of almost irony, I guess. But one of the biggest problems I see in information technology right now, and it's not just specific to any know branch or whatever, it's just there's three basic things that I think you need to succeed in information technology. And technology is just like knowledge of technical stuff. That's the baseline, right? That's what you need to just have a job. But to be successful, you need three things. You need mindset, you need a methodology, and you need mentoring. These are the things you need to truly be successful in information technology. And so the mindset part of this is uh, what I'm seeing a lack of. There's this scarcity mindset that is going around in IT right now, and it's pervading. It's getting worse, not better. And when I see things like what, and this article touches on a little bit, there's a certain fear that comes in with these things. Like the fear is, if I don't toe the line, if I don't show up and be visibly working all the time, then I will be fired. That's scarcity thinking. Abundance thinking says, how can I, and it asks the question, how can I do more work without worrying about that? How can I be more productive and more visibly so productive without just the appearance of it, just spending more time with it, about frustrating myself? That's what abundance thinking does. Abundance thinking says, there's I don't I don't care if I lose this job. I'm worthy and capable of another job. I will find the one that fits my needs and culture. And I think the more we go with a work for home mindset, the more I think that we'll see that companies are more willing to make compromises geographically for their workforce and finding the right fits. And so if we have an abundance mindset, I guarantee you that in a year we will find even better work if that's part of our thinking. If not, then we're kind of, off the rails a little bit. The reason I think that's ironic is that right after I hit stop on the broadcast here, I'm going to go have lunch with a gentleman, Dan Miller, and he wrote 48 Days to the Work You Love. It's something that I'm actually bundling with my book for people that buy from me directly instead of Amazon, that are here in the US, because I think it's that important for people to actually look at this from a standpoint of, gosh, it's not just about what's handed to me, it's about what's a good fit. And I think we're seeing that. So my encouragement to people is to say, look, this is the time. Yeah, this is the time to innovate in a lot of regards. And how you approach work, this is definitely the time to not just take what's handed to you. It's time for you to just determine, okay, what actually works for me? If this is going to be the quote unquote new normal, then what is going to work better for me? And dive into that and really find out. Don't just take somebody else's word for it. Find out what works for you. I'm coaching a couple people right now that are finding in the midst of all this, they're like, huh, I hate information technology. You know, one of them was like, I think I really just want to, fix up houses. I'm like, well, go do that. You know what I mean? It's like, don't just stay where you think you have to be because of some kind of, scarcity mindset that you're only ever going to get what you have. Reality is you got this job as an upgrade from something else. I guarantee it. No matter what it is, you if you're working, it was an upgrade. Even if it was just like an internship is an upgrade from just being a student, right? And so no matter what it is, you were upgraded to where you are now. Now, if you're unemployed right now, like a lot of people are, this is a reality that we're facing, right? That Jeff's laughing. But uh, even in that, we have chances to say, okay, I can either downgrade because I'm scared, or I can upgrade because I'm not going to accept anything less for myself. And this is the time
Yep.
to get really innovative about ways to do that, because there's opportunities that are going to be coming about. So if we invest in ourselves now, there's more chances we'll be of the right mindset
Yep.
and methodology and mentoring capabilities to get to that better place. So hopefully that makes sense for people. Yeah.
One thing I do want to say real quick,
Yeah.
which brought this up, managers, because now it's my turn to pick on managers, right?
Uh-oh.
Um, with the work from home, the
Mhm.
most critical thing that you can do is you have to have faith in your employees. You
Yes.
have to be able to trust them when they work from home. If you are one of those managers that are requiring them to document their day and what they did, that's not good management. That
Yeah.
is saying, I don't trust you. Now, here's the thing, even when I was working in an office, I could never document my day. Why? Because I may be doing 12 things that take about 5 minutes each, within an hour. It's you're being pulled constantly. There's no way you can document that stuff correctly. So you got to have faith in your employees. You hired them for a reason.
Yeah.
Not trusting them is not a reason you hired them. So
And
back
I'm going to
off on
say,
that.
yeah,
And, you got to let these things play out, especially now. You got to let it play out on its own. Obviously, they have to be held responsible, but don't have them document time. That's
yeah.
ridiculous. It
If
doesn't work in
anything,
the office. It doesn't work out of the office.
yeah. If you are somebody who's an employee, you're better off documenting your goals for the day, like I do, and reviewing that,
Absolutely.
but not the time. Not
Yeah.
unless you have some sort of compliance reason where you have to, which is pretty rare these days. I mean, that's been
Yeah.
on the down. So, yeah, I agree with that completely. Yeah, it really is just you got to trust your people to be doing the right things. Otherwise, why did you hire them? You know,
Exactly. Exactly.
if you can't trust your employees, I hate to be so crass about it, but yeah, you need to let them go. If you can't trust them, you got to let them go. Or if you can't trust all of them, you got to go.
Yeah.
All right.
Exactly.
That's just the way
That's
it's gotta be.
exactly right.
You need to get
Yeah.
back into the trenches
Yep.
if you can't do that. And so,
Yep.
and
It's a
any
two-way street. You
meetings,
need the
things
trust to
out
be
there,
there.
yeah, pay attention to that
So,
too. You got to watch your
yep.
managers. There's a management element of your managers too. If your managers aren't catching the vision, you need to give it to them. You're responsible for them not having the vision, not them not having it. It's not their responsibility to cast a vision. It's very important.
Absolutely. Yep.
Cool. This was fun.
That's it. Yeah, this is great. I loved it.
Yeah. If you have any comments for us, just put it right there in the comments after the fact here, and we'll review those as we can. And join
Yep.
us again next week. We've actually got a great couple weeks coming up. We've got Teresa Miller, we've got Nick Rentelen, Jarian Gibson, Doug Brown is going to join us on a special edition, on a Friday edition of our THRIVEcast. So we've got a lot of fun things coming. So make sure you join us live next time. Just go to thrive-it.com /ICS to get our calendar. And I'll put that up on the screen here too, so you have a reference. But yeah, that puts the calendar right into your phone or Outlook or whatever, and so you can keep up with us as well. Thanks for
Yep.
being with us, and we will see you again next week.
Goodbye, everybody.
Cheers.